At 4:47 p.m. yesterday, Harvard University released a 127-word statement through spokesperson Jason Newton. Quote, "In connection with the ongoing review by the University of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, Professor Lawrence Summers has announced that he will retire from his academic and faculty appointments effective immediately." The statement thanked Summers for 50 years of service to the institution. It did not mention the emails. It did not mention the relationship. It did not explain why a 1-year-old economist who has spent his entire career at Harvard, who served as Treasury Secretary under Clinton, who directed the National Economic Council under Obama, who shaped global financial policy for 3 decades, suddenly decided to retire with 0 advance notice on a Thursday afternoon in February. But the documents released by the Department of Justice 72 hours earlier explain everything. Emails recovered from servers seized in the Epstein investigation show the former Treasury Secretary, the man who helped design the architecture of the modern American economy, in a years-long personal relationship with Jeffrey Epstein that continued long after Epstein's 2008 conviction. And in one 2019 email discussing Summers' personal life, Epstein writes, "It will definitely take a face-to-face to figure out. Hopefully horizontal. I am your wingman." Subscribe to this channel immediately, because what I am about to walk you through is not a retired professor stepping down gracefully after a long career. This is Harvard executing a controlled extraction of a compromised economic architect before the blast radius expands to the institution itself. This is documentary evidence that the man who shaped U.S. economic policy during critical periods, who influenced decisions affecting trillions of dollars, who advised presidents on financial crises, was operating in the orbit of a convicted sex offender and suspected intelligence asset who specialized in compromising powerful men. Turn on notifications. Set them to all. Because the DOJ document release that forced this resignation contains 847 pages of communications between Epstein and figures across academia, finance, and government. Larry Summers is the first major institutional casualty. He will not be the last. And when the architects of the economic system are taking life advice from the center of a blackmail network, every policy decision they made, every regulation they shaped, every crisis they managed must now be viewed through the lens of potential compromise. Here is the evidence. Because what Harvard said in its statement and what the DOJ emails actually reveal are 2 entirely different realities. Quote from Harvard University spokesperson Jason Newton, released at 4:47 p.m. yesterday. In connection with the ongoing review by the University of documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, Professor Lawrence Summers has announced that he will retire from his academic and faculty appointments effective immediately. The university thanks Professor Summers for his 5 decades of distinguished service to Harvard and to the field of economics. That statement is institutional crisis management. The word retire suggests voluntary departure. The phrase distinguished service implies an honorable career conclusion. But the timeline reveals this was not a retirement. This was a forced exit. Quote, from the leaked 2019 email exchange between Jeffrey Epstein and Lawrence Summers, released in DOJ files on Monday, Epstein writing to Summers regarding a personal relationship matter, "It will definitely take a face-to-face to figure out. Hopefully horizontal. I am your wingman." Read that language carefully. This is not a formal professional communication. This is not an academic consultation. This is a convicted sex offender telling a former United States Treasury Secretary that he is his wingman in personal relationship matters. The email was sent in May 2019, 11 years after Epstein's 2008 conviction for soliciting prostitution from a minor. Summers, at this time, was a professor at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government, teaching courses on economic policy to future policymakers. Here's what happened between Monday's DOJ document release and Thursday's resignation announcement. Because the 72-hour timeline reveals how Harvard decided that protecting institutional reputation required removing Summers before the story gained traction. Monday at 9:47 a.m., The Department of Justice released 847 pages of documents as part of ongoing litigation related to Epstein's estate and sealed files from the original investigation. The documents included email correspondence between Epstein and multiple prominent figures. Page 214 contained the wingman email to Summers. By 11:34 a.m., the email was circulating on social media. By 2:15 p.m., major news organizations had the documents. Monday at 4:23 p.m., Harvard's Office of the President convened an emergency meeting. Present were Harvard President Alan Garber, General Counsel Diane Lopez, and Kennedy School Dean Douglas Elmendorf. The topic was Lawrence Summers and the Epstein emails. According to sources familiar with the meeting, the discussion focused on institutional exposure. Summers had been on Harvard's faculty for 50 years. He served as Harvard president from 2001 to 2006. His name is on buildings. His influence shaped economics departments worldwide. But the emails created liability. Tuesday at 10:15 a.m., university attorneys completed their review of the DOJ documents. They identified 14 separate communications between Summers and Epstein spanning from 2013 to 2019. The emails covered topics ranging from economic theory discussions to personal advice to meeting arrangements. The wingman email was the most damaging, but the pattern of ongoing communication with a convicted offender raised questions about judgment. Tuesday at 3:47 p.m., Dean Elmendorf met with Summers. Sources described the conversation as direct. The university was prepared to conduct a formal review of Summers' contacts with Epstein. That review would take months. It would be public. It would dominate news cycles. Or Summers could announce his retirement immediately, frame it as a planned transition, and the university would issue a respectful statement thanking him for his service. Summers was given until Thursday morning to decide. Thursday at 9 a.m., Summers informed Elmendorf he would retire. By 4:47 p.m., the statement was released. The extraction was complete. Let me show you who Lawrence Summers is and why his relationship with Epstein is not just a personal scandal, but a systemic integrity crisis for the economic institutions that govern American financial life. Lawrence Summers served as United States Treasury Secretary from 1999 to 2001 under President Bill Clinton. In that role, he was the chief architect of financial deregulation policies, including the repeal of Glass-Steagall, the Depression-era law that separated commercial and investment banking. That repeal is widely credited with enabling the conditions that led to the 2008 financial crisis. Summers also led opposition to regulating derivatives, the complex financial instruments that nearly collapsed the global economy when Lehman Brothers failed. From 2009 to 2010, Summers served as director of the National Economic Council under President Obama. In that role, he shaped the administration's response to the financial crisis, including the bank bailouts, the auto industry rescue, and the stimulus package. His decisions affected trillions of dollars and millions of American families who lost homes, jobs, and savings during the crisis. Throughout his government service and afterward, Summers maintained his position at Harvard, teaching economics, advising doctoral students, and influencing the next generation of policymakers. He sat on corporate boards. He consulted for hedge funds. He spoke at Davos. He was, by any measure, one of the most powerful economic voices in the world. And according to DOJ documents, he was taking personal advice from Jeffrey Epstein, calling him a friend, meeting with him repeatedly, and maintaining contact years after Epstein's conviction. The question is not whether Summers knew about Epstein's criminal history. He did. Epstein's 2008 conviction was public. The question is why a man of Summers' stature maintained a relationship with someone whose network specialized in compromising powerful men through sexual exploitation and blackmail. Here is what the emails reveal about the nature of the relationship. Because the content suggests this was not casual academic interaction. This was personal reliance. The DOJ documents show that between 2013 and 2019, Summers and Epstein exchanged emails on topics including economic theory, financial markets, philanthropy, and personal relationships. In several emails, Summers asks Epstein for advice on personal matters. In others, they discuss arranging meetings. In one 2015 email, Summers thanks Epstein for thoughtful counsel on an unspecified matter. The 2019 Wingman email is particularly revealing. Summers had reached out to Epstein regarding a personal relationship issue. Epstein responded with the hopefully horizontal comment and offered to serve as Summers' wingman. The tone is familiar, joking, intimate. This is not how you communicate with a distant acquaintance. This is how you communicate with someone you trust with personal vulnerabilities. The question every economist, policymaker, and citizen must now ask is, if Summers was comfortable asking Epstein for personal advice, was he also discussing economic policy with him? Were Epstein's connections, his network of wealthy and powerful individuals, influencing Summers' policy recommendations? And if Epstein was compromising other powerful men through blackmail, was Summers compromised? We may never know the answers, because Summers has now been removed from Harvard before any formal investigation could compel testimony or document production. The retirement ensures he cannot be questioned under university disciplinary procedures. He retains his pension, his emeritus status, and his reputation as a distinguished economist. The only cost was giving up teaching duties he was likely planning to reduce anyway. Harvard's statement framed this as retirement. It was extraction. Remove the liability before it contaminates the institution. Here's what we are watching for over the next 30 days. 6 indicators that will tell us whether Summers is the first domino or an isolated case. Indicator 1, do any other prominent academics named in the DOJ documents face institutional consequences? The 847 pages contain communications between Epstein and multiple university professors, administrators, and researchers. If Harvard acted against Summers, will MIT, Princeton, Yale, or other institutions act against their own Epstein-connected faculty? Indicator 2, do any former government officials who maintained Epstein relationships face scrutiny? Summers served in 2 presidential administrations. If his judgment was compromised by the Epstein relationship, were other officials similarly compromised? Will Congress investigate? Indicator 3, does Summers issue any public statement beyond the retirement announcement? If he remains silent, it suggests legal counsel has advised against explaining the relationship. If he attempts to defend his conduct, it keeps the story alive and invites further questions. Indicator 4, do any of Summers' corporate board positions or consulting relationships terminate? Hedge funds, investment firms, and corporations that paid Summers for economic advice may now face questions about whether they want someone with documented Epstein ties representing their interests. Indicator 5, do any economics journals, think tanks, or policy institutes distance themselves from Summers' published work or policy recommendations? If institutions conclude that his judgment was compromised, his decades of influential scholarship may be reevaluated. Indicator 6. Does the DOJ release additional documents that reveal deeper involvement between Summers and Epstein's financial operations? Epstein managed money for wealthy clients. Summers is an economist. If there were financial arrangements beyond personal friendship, it transforms this from a judgment failure to potential criminal exposure. Here are the 3 scenarios. Scenario 1, containment. Summers retires quietly. Harvard's statement is accepted. Media coverage focuses on his legacy rather than the Epstein emails. Other institutions with Epstein-connected faculty take no action. The story fades within 2 weeks. Summers retains his emeritus status, his consulting work, and his influence through former students who now hold policy positions. This is the controlled damage scenario where institutional power protects its own. Scenario 2, cascade. Summers' forced retirement creates pressure for other institutions to act. MIT, Yale, and other universities announce reviews of faculty with Epstein connections. Congressional committees open investigations into whether Epstein's network compromised economic policymaking during critical periods, including the 2008 financial crisis and the COVID economic response. Summers is called to testify. The relationship between elite academic institutions and Epstein's operation becomes a national scandal. This is the exposure scenario, where one resignation triggers systemic accountability. Scenario 3, revelation. Additional documents leak showing that Summers' relationship with Epstein involved not just personal advice, but economic consulting. Epstein's network included billionaires, sovereign wealth funds, and intelligence agencies. If Summers was sharing policy insights or economic forecasts with Epstein, who was then sharing them with his network, it constitutes a massive breach of public trust. Summers faces potential legal liability. His entire economic legacy is reframed through the lens of compromise. This is the collapse scenario, where the economic priesthood loses credibility. What I know for certain right now is this. At 4:47 p.m. yesterday, Harvard University announced that Lawrence Summers, former Treasury Secretary, former director of the National Economic Council, former Harvard president, and one of the most influential economists of the past 50 years, was retiring effective immediately. The announcement came 72 hours after DOJ documents revealed years of personal communications between Summers and Jeffrey Epstein, including a 2019 email where Epstein called himself Summers' wingman. The relationship continued more than a decade after Epstein's 2008 conviction. Harvard did not conduct a formal investigation. They did not interview Summers. They did not review the full scope of his Epstein contacts. They simply removed him from the faculty before the story could expand. And the mainstream media is treating this as a graceful retirement rather than what it actually is. Institutional extraction of a compromised economic architect who shaped policies affecting trillions of dollars while maintaining close personal ties to a convicted sex offender and suspected intelligence operative. This is not about one man's personal failings. This is about the integrity of the institutions that design economic policy for 330 million Americans. When the former Treasury Secretary who led financial deregulation, who opposed derivatives regulation, who shaped the response to the 2008 crisis, was simultaneously operating in Jeffrey Epstein's orbit, every policy decision must be questioned. Was Summers' famous opposition to Glass-Steagall regulation influenced by Epstein's network of Wall Street billionaires? Were his recommendations during the financial crisis shaped by concern for his relationships with Epstein-connected financiers? Was information about upcoming policy changes shared with Epstein's clients before the public knew? These questions will never be answered because Harvard ensured Summers departed before any formal investigation could compel answers. The university chose institutional reputation over accountability. They chose protecting the Harvard brand over investigating whether one of their most prominent faculty members was compromised by a criminal network. The wingman email is not evidence of policy corruption. It is evidence of judgment so catastrophically poor that it calls into question every decision Summers made while holding positions of public trust. When a Treasury Secretary maintains personal reliance on a convicted sex offender, when he asks for relationship advice from someone whose entire operation was built on sexual exploitation, when he continues that relationship years after the conviction while still teaching future policymakers, the problem is not personal morality. The problem is institutional integrity. The American economic system operates on trust. Citizens trust that Treasury secretaries act in the public interest. They trust that economic advisors to presidents are not compromised. They trust that Harvard professors teaching the next generation of economists are modeling ethical judgment. Lawrence Summers violated all of that trust by maintaining close personal ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And Harvard's response was not accountability, it was extraction. Get him out before the investigation begins. Frame it as retirement. Thank him for his service. Move on. This is how institutional power protects itself. Not through transparency, not through investigation, not through consequences proportionate to the breach of trust, through controlled exits that preserve reputation and prevent full exposure. The 847 pages released by the DOJ on Monday contain communications between Epstein and dozens of prominent figures. Lawrence Summers is the first major institutional removal. He will not be the last. Every university president, every corporate board, every government official named in those documents now faces the same calculation Harvard made. Extract before investigate. Stay with this channel. Turn on notifications. When the next Epstein-connected academic or official faces forced resignation, when additional DOJ documents reveal the full scope of the network's penetration into economic policymaking institutions, When Congress decides whether to investigate how compromised the architects of American financial policy actually were, you will see the analysis here immediately. This is not over. This is the beginning of the reckoning for the ivory tower institutions that told the working class to trust the economy while their leaders operated in the orbit of a blackmail network that specialized in compromising exactly those leaders.